Thank you all for being here. This is ACRO's Bye Bye Residency Interview Scaries. I know that when I started this process when I was at M4, it was very overwhelming, and I wish I had, you know, hindsight is 2020. I think I would do a few things differently, but overall, I think it was a very good experience. But I think there's a lot that you can learn from these program directors. So thank you to our panelists that are volunteering their time for us so we can learn and hopefully make sure that the interview process is just a little bit smoother and a little bit less anxiety inducing. Do you all mind maybe introducing yourselves?
I can go first. I don't know if I'm where I am on everybody's screens, but I'm Michael Milano. I'm the radiation oncology former program director at the University of Rochester. I stepped down in July of this year, and Dr. Kim Grugelos is taking over as program director. But I've been program director for over a dozen years, so I hopefully have some insight and can give you some guidance. I appreciate people taking time out of their day to hear what we have to say.
I guess I'll go next. So I'm Jessica Frakes. I'm one of the radiation oncologists at Moffitt. I have been program director for the last 4 years and was associate program director for 3 years before that. So again, kind of echoing what Dr. Milano is saying, excited to be a part of the panel, and you'll probably see some different opinions between all of us, which is really just to kind of show you all that there's not a right answer. There's not the best application for, each program. So, important to kind of, find the right fit for yourself, just like, we're finding the right fit for the program. So just kind of keep that in mind and look forward to the conversations.
And I'm AJ Echeverria. I'm the program director at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. I've been at Baylor forever. I've been here for medical school and internship and residency, and stayed on as faculty. And I've been doing program director for now about 5 years. Program associate program director about 2 years before that. So. Very much kind of Houston native focused and everything. So I do gynecologic and CNS radiation oncology in our practice, and really love working with residents, students, and really looking forward to helping you guys out in this whole stressful process.
Thank you all. And I am Eliane Garlock. I am a PGY4 at VCU, and I am the chair of the communications committee subcommittee on the resident committee on ACRO. And so I'm super, super thankful that we have these amazing program directors. All right. So I think what we'll do is I'll ask all the questions. If you have something, if any of the participants have questions, please put them in the chat. You can show them to anyone and we can get to them. You can also message me privately if you want to ask it anonymously. And then I also have a list, and they're mainly just some guardrails, but we can kind of see whichever way the conversation goes and what questions pop up and just what you guys have or want to share. Um, so first of all, I was kind of thinking we could do like pre-interview preparation, the actual interview day, and then follow up. So those are kind of the three pillars. So we'll start now with like how do we do this like pre-interview preparation and scheduling? How quickly should we respond? How many programs we should reply to or apply to?
I guess I'll start with a few of those and, feel free again, anyone else feel free to chime in. I think I usually tell the students that ask me this question, especially of like how many programs to apply to, is, you know, think of the programs as some of your safety, some realistic, and some reach schools or residencies, and making sure that these are places that you actually would consider going. Um, so apply broadly from that perspective, but if you have geographical preferences of places that you won't go, then I wouldn't waste your time, your money to do that. So I think that's kind of my first as it goes to how many programs to apply to. You know your application, you know how strong you are, and so think of it that direction. Also, that's where you talk with your dean or your mentors and kind of looking at your application and where you did your aways and things like that. As far as how quickly to respond, I can speak for our program. We send out the number of we send out our first round of interviews, and there's usually more than one day, and it's kind of first come of how those days get filled. So I do say you should respond as quickly as possible, especially if you're trying to have a specific day out of the multiples. And then I always say, don't be discouraged if you get that second round or you hear the interview went out already. We try not to send everyone at the very first time because we want that flexibility on those days and for you all to have some say in when you come to interview. So that would be my, at least on the first two questions that you had asked, kind of my approach to those.
Yeah, and I'll echo the the sentiment about, applying really only places that you're comfortable attending for, for 4 years and potentially, so a lot of people stay in the places that they do their residency or at least in the areas they move their families and things. Um, Also, just kind of as far as how many programs to apply to, that's always like a moving target, right? I mean, I think if you're not familiar, there's been a lot of fluctuation in kind of the number of the matching of like positions to applicants, and that's kind of been fluctuating up and down the ratios and kind of a quote unquote how competitive it is at any given year. It is trending back to kind of where it was. Seems to be where when I was applying, over I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years ago. I can't remember now. But it seems to be applying to kind of trending that way. So you may want to consider applying a little bit more broadly with what Dr. Frakes said about knowing your own strengths and applications. I like the idea of kind of having different kind of tiers um, of kind of prospects for your application, um, and knowing about kind of where you're going to be going. And with a lot of places doing virtual interviews these years, it is kind of tempting to apply very broadly and kind of accept numerous interviews. But always remember, you know whether or not you're comfortable attending that program, and uh, you know, and keep that in the back of your mind, kind of when you're deciding on where to interview.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to what's already been said. But you do want to, as Dr. Frank said, you want to keep into mind how competitive you may be. Knowing that if you get an interview, someone looked at your application and thought that you would potentially be a good match for their program. But also realizing that you want to have enough interviews because unlike undergrad or medical school, you're not going to get an invitation to accept an offer. It's done by a computer. A lot of this is out of our control and out of your control. So you do want to have enough places that you've interviewed at and that you can rank. So sometimes it's tough. And if you over apply and over accept interviews, you can always go back and decline and cancel, hopefully not at the last minute, so the program has time to respond to it. So I think it's always safer to apply a little bit more broadly, but again, don't apply to places that you would absolutely never go to. And I'm just repeating what everybody else has said.
And I don't know if this is going to come up later, but I probably like one of the most important things to be thinking about. I think applications opened recently. Don't wait too long to submit your application, because I think a lot of, at least we tend to wrap up our kind of reviews of applicants, by early October, mid-October. And we're really not, and the way it works from our end, if these applications come in late, we have to kind of actively go and look for them, and we're often not really doing that, pretty that late in the interviews, because we already have so many people that we've kind of have on the on that have already been reviewed and already been kind of like tiered out as far as like looking for invites and things. So getting those applications in fairly early is super, super important, at least in our eyes at Baylor.
I'd have to agree with that. If we get an application very late, usually the message that we're getting is somebody decided to add us at the last minute because they weren't getting enough interview offers and weren't interested in our program up front, which is fine. We understand that, but I think our deadline technically is November 1st. If we're getting an application in October 30th, I'm guessing that person is not as interested in our program and scrambling. So you don't want to be put in a position where you are sending that message to somebody.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, similar approach from us. Most of us start looking around Astro. So beginning of October is when we kind of start looking, and I think within a couple of weeks we kind of don't really go back religiously to check to see if there's new, applicants in the system. So
I think it opened September 3rd, right? I think I was just looking at the timeline. And then I think, when are you guys first able to see all the applicants? Because I'm a little confused because I know that we can start submitting and then at some point you guys can see it. When is that transition?
I think it's in the tw September 20
20.
in the
Okay.
20s somewhere.
Okay,
I
good.
can't remember the exact date.
Good. My only piece of advice is that I think I applied to the right amount of radiation oncology programs, but I totally underapplied to transitional and intern year programs. So that is another tip that I know it's not RadOnc specific, but I think in full transparency, I think I applied to only 32 programs because I was very picky about this is actually where I want to go. This is where I can actually see myself. And I ended up getting, I think 15 interviews. I think I declined one or two. And then I only applied to 30 TYs and 30 IMs, and I only received less than five interviews in total. So that's just my piece of advice. Total tangential, but don't underapply to TYs or IMs. That's where you want to spend your money.
I've heard that recently, just to echo that point, people from the last few years have said that they also kind of didn't think through the prelims, the TYs, or whatever you choose to do. So 100% agree.
Yeah, it is wild. And it's very like location specific. So for me, I'm from South Carolina. I only received um, interviews from TYs and IM years from South Carolina and from Georgia. I literally reached out to someone in North Carolina, and that's the program I went to. So that's another thing. I think it's very regional dependent, from what I can tell. Um, there was a question that stated, what's a creative way that we can kind of research the program so that we have a little bit of a better idea beyond maybe just looking at the website or, yeah, just maybe beyond looking at the website and brochures.
So I would strongly consider there's a bunch of meet and greets that get posted on the Rover website. And so I think that's a really nice way. It's usually resident run. And so it's a nice way to kind of ask some of those informal questions, get to know the culture. I know there's some questions about how do you assess culture. So I think meet and greets is a great way. And then obviously the website has a lot of information. And in the beginning of COVID, a lot of programs did. Thank you. I see someone posted the Rover website. So thank you, Hari, for that. And then the other thing is during the beginning of COVID, a lot of programs had videos that were made. Ours program did not do it, and I was always very jealous that we didn't have the funding to do it during those years. But there's some really great videos that programs kind of put on about their program that are, usually the residents run, and I think it gives an idea of things that you may want to know that's not on the website.
Yeah, and I would say one thing that can, there's always like a barrier or stigma when you're applying to cities where you maybe haven't had any experience with, or when I was applying, I remember I grew up in Houston. It's funny enough, I stayed in Houston, but I was applying to places in the Northeast and like all these in California and stuff, and it was always like a little bit intimidating to try and show that yes, I would be willing to come here. So you research the area, research the city, the location of the site, the different training sites that they're at, and if you're really interested in a particular place, kind of really having a good um, showing that you've actually looked into that place and made some, you know, educated research on the on where you would be spending your time, and you can ask questions about the city and things like that. Those really show an interest in, especially if it's somewhere you've never been, or again with these virtual interviews, may not ever go to until you're actually there training. So having that kind of background is a great way to show interest in that particular program.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said. A simple thing you can do is look up the program on a map if it's not in a major city. Well, we get a lot of applicants who tell us that they really want to be close to New York City, and I can tell right away that they didn't look at a map and that there's 20 to 30 programs that are closer to New York City than our program. Um, and I think looking at the website, I know Dr. Garlick said in addition to that, but it really is important because that's what the program is putting out in the public. And if you look at the website and know a little bit about it, that means you put a little bit of effort into learning about the program. I know there are certain applicants that I could tell they looked at my web profile, PubMed did, and you don't have to go into that much depth. But look, seeing if you get a list of interviewees, you can take a look and see what their website says about them, learn a little bit about them, so you can ask questions. But again, you don't have to dive in and learn about their history in depth and stalk them, but just know a little bit about them and what they do. Because you don't want to ask questions that you can, a 30-second Google search would give you the answer, because that means you didn't put any effort. You want to ask questions that you generally are interested in. Um, and that, maybe, you did look at the website and they mentioned a paper and you're generally interested in it, but, don't try to come up with questions, just ask questions, try to have them be things that you're generally interested in, when you are researching the program. And I think also to some extent, a lot of the websites have information about the residents, just maybe see where they're from, what med schools they went to, see if you have any potential connections or similarity between the residents, so that when you meet the residents, you may be able to um, talk about some maybe shared experiences or things that you have in common. Because I think the residents, at least in our program or other programs, carry a lot of weight. They'll tell us after the fact that this individual applicant was outstanding and would be a great fit. So you want to know as much as you can about the program, but nobody's expecting you to know every specific detail about every individual, but just know what's easily accessible online.
I cannot emphasize what you just said about the residents having a lot of say as it relates to how we rank applicants. They see a different side than sometimes we see, and I think it's really nice to have that perspective. And again, this is, a lot about for you guys to understand our culture is also through the residents and that experience, but also them getting to know you. So I can't stress that enough, the importance of, communicating with the residents, getting to know the current residents and seeing if that's a good fit for you.
Can y'all talk about a little bit about how you would maybe, like you sent your interview to, or your invitation to someone, your application, and then you didn't get an interview. Like, how do you go about maybe reaching out to the programs? Who do you reach out to? How do you do it?
I can comment. I think it does help to reach out to programs you're genuinely interested in. I can tell you that we've interviewed and matched people who did this, because we get a lot of applicants, and oftentimes we may think someone's just not interested because they don't have any geographical ties. And nowadays you can signal, and you can actually put in comments that suggests you might be interested in a certain region. Um, but even with that, if it doesn't hurt to send an email to someone explaining why you're interested in the program, what aspects of the program that you're interested in. Obviously, if they don't respond to you, you don't want to keep harassing them, because that may be a subtle way that they're saying that they don't have a mutual interest. And the top point is when to reach out. And there is no right or wrong answer. If you do it earlier in the process, that maybe gives the programs a little more insight into someone who's more genuinely interested. But a lot of people may not think to do that, or may think that it's out of place to do that and then decide after the fact, and that's fine too. If you get an email in November or December, it doesn't hurt to, I think the programs would potentially be receptive to that. Again, others may have differing opinions, but I do know that if someone reaches out to us and expresses interest, we do definitely weigh that into our decisions.
Do you know when you would suggest someone reach out, like maybe mid-October or like, maybe give some time to possibly get an interview invitation and then send it, or basically go ahead and send it, you know, early
Yeah,
October?
I think if you're going to do it very early in the process, you don't want to bombard every program. You can sometimes tell when there's canned letters and it's copy and pasted different fonts. You don't want to send one of those because that sends a pretty glaring message that you're just sending this to every program. You want to, if you're writing a letter or email expressing interest, you want to specify something about that program that's unique to that program, about what that would potentially make you think that it would be a good match for you. So I think earlier is never going to hurt, but it doesn't hurt if it's later on. A lot of people when they see online interview offer went out and they didn't get one. Um, that's a time when we'll sometimes get these emails saying we're genuinely interested in your program and this is why. I could say for us, I know every program does it differently. We trickle out our interview offers, and the reason for that is so our program coordinators didn't get bombarded, and we kind of triage. We kind of have them have different priorities. So people have rotated with us, or people who are students that are on our program, or people who are couples matching, and there's mutual interest. Those are the offers we sent early. So it's a very small number. So a lot of times you'll see on the message boards a program sent out invites, and maybe it was only to those select people that had quote unquote inside connections because you want to give them first dibs of dates. Um, so I don't know if I answered your question, but I think anytime along the way is a good time to reach out to a program. If you're really truly interested in a program and they have something that really interests you, earlier is always better.
Yeah,
And
I
do
will
you,
say I probably get 40 plus of these emails every year. Um, and they come early, middle, at the end. So there's obviously pluses and minuses to each time, but you read enough of these and you really can tell who's showing genuine interest or who is sending it to all programs. So if you are going to do that, please don't send it to every program because we can tell. So pick a few that, maybe the ones you signaled that's showing some interest, but maybe a few others that you really have interest in. Make it sincere, do your research, show up to meet and greets, and then send an email that is known that there's true interest would be my biggest advice because we read so many of them and I try to respond to everyone, but after a while when it just seems very generic, you get lost in your day and kind of forget. So try to make it stand out if you're going to do it.
do
Yeah, and
you, oh, sorry.
the whole process is really hard. I mean, like picking who to invite for interviews is just like is often very challenging because there's so many great people. It's like um, so if you don't get an interview, it's not, hey, that you're a terrible candidate or something. It's just sometimes we do look at some of these things like geography and things. So if you really, just like has been said already, if you have like a genuine interest in a particular region or a particular program for whatever reason, please express that to us. And I don't really know what the perfect timing is for that. I would say probably sometime or maybe early October, mid-October, something like that, where we're kind of making these decisions. But I would also, if you are someone that for whatever circumstances you do submit an application somewhat late, I would say like don't expect like interviews to just come rolling in. Like you definitely need to reach out because a lot of times there's been a few situations where I read kind of an email about some extra special circumstance of why that happened, and we may kind of consider those situations. Um so yeah, it's a tough process for everyone, and it's hard for us to kind of make these decisions too. So sometimes if we hear some genuine interest, it can really be helpful.
Do you suggest people send emails to the program directors directly or first to like program coordinators? I was given the advice to always like reach out to the program coordinator. Um, I don't know what's
I think
appropriate.
if
What do you prefer?
I think if it's before an interview, I think it's okay to reach out to the program director and program coordinator. For us, we tell applicants if there's anything that they're going to reach out to us about after the fact, do not interview me, or any of the faculty. Or do not email me or the faculty. Email the program coordinator, and that's specifically what we and other programs have tried to minimize communications after the fact. But beforehand, I'm I think everybody's different, but I'm okay getting direct emails from people, as opposed to me getting forwarded emails from my coordinator.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, well, can we maybe switch gears to talk about like how do we truly assess culture, especially, and then I guess that also brings up the topic of, it's kind of hard to assess culture through Zoom, but now that some interviews are going into in person, so I guess there's two questions like, how are we going to handle this like in person versus virtual? Are you guys doing in person? Or are you guys doing virtual? And then how do we assess culture, especially on Zoom?
Yeah, I can give it a shot. I think it was brought up earlier, but the residence is a really big way to picking the residents' brains in any way you can is probably the best way you're going to get a sense of the culture at the program. Because if they're happy, then generally there's that's a good sign. If they seem like stressed or unhappy or uncertain about their questions, then that's kind of a red flag. We are still doing virtual this year. Just we have kind of a blanket decision throughout Baylor. Just generally, just everyone is required to do virtual. But if you are going in person, going usually there's some kind of social hour or happy hour or something before or after some kind of dinner. Go to that. That's definitely a good way to assess the vibes and just kind of get a idea of how everyone interacts with each other and how happy everyone is. I think that's kind of because I don't think anyone's going to just be like, well, if someone tells you it's the culture is bad, then that's a very bad sign. But they're usually not going to, you know, volunteer that, but just kind of getting, a sense of how they're acting and, asking some, questions that may kind of reveal some information would be helpful. Obviously, you don't want to be, too aggressive and probing, just out of courtesy, but that I think the residents are a good resource.
Yeah, so we're in person. We've done in person for the last 2 years, and so we're continuing that trend. I will say, prior to that, we did a couple of years of virtual. So USF and Moffitt has either everything is in person or everything is Zoom. So no second looks, no anything else. It either is one or the other. And so a couple of years ago, we switched to in person. But again, show up to those dinners. So in the virtual world, we had like a Zoom dinner where we sent the applicants like an Uber Eats gift card, and then they had games prepared or breakout rooms and things like that on Zoom, again, to try to help with that culture aspect of the program. And then in person, again, show up to the events if you can. If you can't, let the coordinator or somebody know. Again, I don't care, make up an excuse of why you couldn't come, but if you don't show up and there's no discussion about it, it does kind of signal there's a lack of interest, or you didn't want to get there the night before, or to kind of be a part of it. And then the residents, again, I'm getting older, but when I applied for residency, I remember the residents were very straightforward. And so there were programs that I interviewed at where the residents said to me, I wouldn't rank here if I could do this again. And so, again, it was maybe one or two programs, and that's okay. And I think if you build that relationship and talk to them and you build that trust, they're going to be honest with you. And then asking them questions like, do y'all do stuff out of work together? Tell me about activities the last time you all did something. And you can really gauge, how well that they interact with each other. You don't have to be best friends, but do they have your back, right? Like if you have to leave for whatever reason, can you hand your pager to another resident without questions? Like that's the culture that you really want to be at, where you feel supported by your co-residents. And this is part of the reason we went back to in person is because we wanted that culture to be seen and then also really wanted to get to know that person because there's challenges on Zoom. I understand obviously all the benefits of Zoom, obviously monetary benefits, the list goes on. But we had made that decision really from that culture aspect of getting to know people better.
So our institution has stuck with Zoom, and it's just like I think everywhere else that's doing it, it's institution wide. So it is tough to gauge culture, and I think the questions of what do residents do together, I think, is a good way to gauge that. And you can also ask about interaction with the nurses and the therapist, because it is really. I mean, I'm presuming you all did rotations or radiation oncology, so it's a very large group of people that are involved in the care of patients and programs with good culture. The residents are comfortable going up to the nurses with questions or concerns of the therapist, and maybe they hang out after work, happy hours, and so those are the type of questions to ask about the culture. Um, you may run into a resident that does say that the culture is bad, and you have to kind of gauge whether is that resident an outlier or there's something with that resident or is it the program. And that's tough to do. Um, and that's, there's a lot of, I know there's the online students out there network and the Excel sheets that they have that are separate from that. And you can glean some information from that, knowing that, of course, that's all a little bit of unfiltered, anonymous information, but it's out there. So I think you can gauge some information from that as well. And maybe, if you're really interested in a program, really want to research it more, you can talk to former residents that have graduated. Information is usually easily accessible online. It's, if you're ranking 15, 16 programs, obviously you won't be doing that for all the programs. Otherwise, you won't have enough time to do medical school. But it's, if you're really questioning a decision and really like a place but not sure, that's one way to gauge how the culture of a program. Um, but it's tough. Even in person, I think we used to interview on weekends and the department was dead, but it was easy for people to fly in and out of Rochester, New York then. And I always kind of debated whether that was the right decision because you can never gauge the culture of the department. Now with Zoom, it's even more challenging. But it's in talking to people, I think is the best way. And seeing how the residents interact with each other too. So you can kind of see, do these people seem like they're friends? And again, a lot of it's judgment. And it's hard to be objective about those things, but and culture is also maybe something you can't quantify or have an objective measure on. It's just kind of a gut feel. And that's, I think a lot of the programs you're going to rank are maybe based on gut feel.
That's perfect. I think there was a question about how to make your personal statement stand out, like I don't know, how much time, what's the length? I think, most of the advice is like less than a page or like not more than a page. Yeah.
I guess I'll take a start of that. I will say, please keep it to a page. We read a lot of these personal statements, so I do agree. I think, no more than a page for me is something I do look at. Again, if someone it goes over a page, it's not a negative, but we do read a lot of applications. Um, as far as, how to make it stand out, I mean, in my opinion, right, unless you have some amazing, unique story, most of these letters kind of are showing your intellectual curiosity or what drove you to radiation oncology, um, and things like that. And so it's something that's not seen in your CV or your application that you want us to know, something that drives you, something that motivates you. That's really what we're looking for in there is how to differentiate you from someone else with almost the exact same transcript and the same experiences. Um, Obviously, little things like again, we all make mistakes, but do spell check. Maybe look at the grammar that you're putting into this, things like that. I know, at least for me, I was never an English major, so that was never a strong point, but have your mentors read it. Make sure that it flows nicely. But yeah, I think that's probably what I'd say mostly about it.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to highlight things in your CV because when we're scanning, I don't know how everyone does it differently, but usually when I'm reviewing applications, that's the first I'll read the personal statement like first. Like that's what I do first, just because that just gives me an idea of who you are. And so, on your extracurricular activities, if there's just like a line about something you did on a summer, that's not as impactful as if you kind of describe like how that changed you, or what it did for you, or just something that you took away from that, if it was really impactful. So um there's there's a lot of it's hard there's not a lot of ways to like stand out, like unless you have some kind of incredible story, which you can't always control. But there's a lot of ways to kind of stand out in negative ways, just like Dr. Frakes mentioned, grammar, just kind of poorly constructed prose and things like that. Just it just bodes, it tells me like, oh, this person didn't really put that much effort into this, or didn't really think about it too much. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to add. I think, the personal state, a lot of them are very similar, and that's fine. Um, maybe you didn't have a major event in your life that changed your path, and that's perfectly fine. You might want to be honest. What I kind of view the personal statement is, I read them all, and I get to feel like I get to know the person a little bit better. And generally, it's kind of a neutral, like it's a good personal statement. But sometimes there's something in there that's so impressive that I feel like maybe it bumps them up in my mind. Very rarely, maybe less than a handful of the maybe 1,000 applications I reviewed, it knocks you down because it's hard to have personal statement hurt you because it's who you are. If it's sloppily done, or um, you can tell there was no effort put into it, maybe that can knock you down. And one thing that I would also say is there's something that's looks like a major fault in your application, that's one place to address it. So if you failed your boards because a parent was dying, that's a place to put it so that often the dean's letter will address that as well. Or if failed the class because you were going through chemotherapy for Hodgkin's lymphoma, those types of things. Those are the places to address something that someone who's looking at your CV or your transcript might think is something that would be a red flag, and maybe you have a good reason for that. Some students get they get some type of disciplinary action, and if you don't address that in the personal statement, the person looking at that's going to want to know why. So this is a very small percentage of people, obviously, but if you have that, you want to make sure that it's addressed. And maybe your dean's letter addresses it, but if it doesn't, that personal statement's a place to do it. And you don't want that to be the bulk of the personal statement. You want your personal statement to be what it normally would be, and then one little paragraph or half paragraph that explains something in your application that may not be favorable.
I know that was one of the questions, is like how to address weaknesses, and I think that's a perfect way to discuss that. I think we need to move on to the actual interview day. I think there was one question about like how to follow up if no interview invitation if you're an IMG, but I think we already like really covered that. So I think, switching to the like actual interview day, like how do you present yourself maybe professionally and enthusiastically, but like not overly enthusiastically, and then how to make it, yeah, how to go about professionally and all these things.
Be yourself. That is my biggest advice is be authentic, be yourself. If you've gotten the interview, that means the program is actually very interested in you, right? So come in with some confidence, but come in of, I want to make sure this is a place that I also want to be. It's just as much us interviewing you as you interviewing us. Um, so again, I really say be yourself. Listen, we all know the nerves are going to be high. We all know that you're going to get asked something that I sometimes like, why would one of my faculty ask this question? That's okay. We all make mistakes, just like you're going to make a mistake on an interview. Be flexible, be understanding, and be yourself is probably my initial advice.
Yeah, and I would say, try to put everything, all of your CV, everything about you, try to put it together and kind of come in with like a bit of a story about yourself, build yourself as kind of like how did you get to this point? Because, kind of formulating a good um, kind of like story and person like putting yourself forward is really important as just kind of a holistic approach. You're not just like a summation of all these little pieces and try to integrate them together and how they, maybe ping ponged off to each other to kind of bring you to this point. So that's really important. Also, like questions, I think it was just mentioned in the chat, like try to come up with some, pretty unique questions and bonus points if you can maybe ask some very specific questions for the program. Those are important, not just to get the information, but also just to show that you are interested. And it's always it kind of always is a shame when the interview kind of fizzles towards the end just because it's like, well, no, I don't have any more questions, or, I'm not, that's it. And then, so just be ready just to have a few questions in your back pocket just to come up with, because those really show interest.
Yeah, man, I agree with everything that was said. Every interviewer is gonna have a different style. Some are gonna be very verbose and extroverted. Some are gonna be kind of quiet. Some will have reviewed your application in depth, and others will have glanced at it and know nothing about you. And that we don't encourage that, but that some interviewers or maybe won't put the effort in, and that obviously will give you information about the program as well, or about that individual at least. But I think it is a good idea to have well-designed questions. It's also okay to have some canned questions, and as long as you kind of preface it, this is a question I ask of all programs, so that the person who's interviewing doesn't feel like you're just kind of running through a question mindlessly. Because if you phrase it that way, even if it's a canned question, the person who's interviewing you will know that's an um, important question for you, and it may be about culture, it may be about um, how easy it is to have a family. Um, those types of, anything that's important to you, I think it's worthwhile to ask. But again, as I think I said earlier, don't ask questions that a 30-second Google search would give you an answer, like, how close are you to Toronto? I mean, those type of things I hopefully you would have looked up beforehand.
I think someone's asking a little bit more about specific questions that are vital for RADONC. So I can give a few and then I can, turn it back over to my colleagues on the call as well. But, you know, I always think it's important to ask, as RADONC has changed with like new minimums and new requirements, how is the program able to meet those? And has that changed or affected the rotations or the education? I think that's always a nice question to kind of have an understanding of. And again, I don't know if everyone knows what I'm talking about. So it used to just be number of simulations or cases that you had to do. Now there's disease site specific ones that you have to meet. And I think that had kind of changed some programs and rightfully so, made us make sure you guys were getting a comprehensive experience. So I think that's a good one. I think another thing is, asking program directors, some of my favorite questions to answer is like, what is something you are so proud about your program? Or where do you see this changing, right? Like, what do you see in the next 5 years, right? Because when you guys interview, you have a prelim year and then you start. So the program or the department could look different. What's the growth? What opportunities do you have from a research or a mentorship or leadership or anything that you are truly interested in? I think is a nice way also to kind of assess culture. Um, but those are some of my favorite questions to be asked. So I'll turn it over to the others.
Yeah, I guess just make sure you understand kind of how the structure is at the program. Like a lot of I know we have a fairly somewhat confusing site structure. I mean, we have three different sites that residents rotate at. So it's like we try to make that very clear throughout the day, and just like where you'll be throughout the day, or and kind of how much time you're spending at each site, and like what disease sites you're training in at each site. But if that's not entirely clear or made clear at any point, make sure you understand that, because like you don't want any surprises if you end up going to that program that, oh, like you spend 3 months 20 miles from the main sites, or whatever kind of things that might come up that maybe weren't immediately apparent. So make sure to kind of just make sure every question is answered as far as how the program functions and where you'll be and things like that.
I also like, I see in the comments, some of the things I really like is also, have your residents done any rotations outside of the department? So, I think someone was touching on global health opportunities. Again, I can speak for our program. We've had residents that have gone to Ghana. We just had a resident come back from Australia. So there are things, if that's something that's interesting to you or something that you want as a career, I think that's really important. I see, is the benefits. I think at least we give the medical students when you guys come interview kind of an idea of what the benefits look like and try to give you some of that information. Obviously, you can ask questions if you need more clarification on that. The call schedule, when you're meeting with the residents, ask them. I think every place does it a little bit differently as far as, front loading, back loading, how does that look like? What's the support from the residents? I think is also really important. And then also that I see the research year, how many months of research do you get? Do you have any opportunities during the rotations to do research? Like, are there any admin days or things like that? And then is there flexibility in the curriculum? So, for instance, most people will kind of give you a guide of this is what the 4 years look like, but is that set in stone, or can you, put 6 months or 9 months of research together and non-Holman pathway, and what does that look like? And you'll just get an idea. I think that's another way to assess the culture and flexibility and support that the program has to develop you and your career goals.
We have anything to add to what's already been said and what's in the chat? These are all great things to ask about.
Someone was asking about what's the most common, like the biggest mistake you see on interview day or during the interview application process, just so we know what not to do.
I think some of this is common sense, but just don't act frazzled or look frazzled, or and we understand that maybe you as a med student just got off AD rotation or ICU rotation, but just try to do the best you can to look awake and interested. It's hard to mess up just being yourself, and kind of view it as the program is interviewing you, but you're also interviewing the program. You're trying to learn more about each other, and try to make it as though you're having a conversation with someone that you met at a restaurant or a bar or a coffee shop about a topic that's mutually interested in you. Messing up, I think it's hard to do, and maybe um, people's personalities don't always mesh, and maybe you're being yourself and it doesn't mesh with somebody, and you can't control that because you have to be who you are. So I think in terms of messing up, I think it's just if it's you almost have to make an effort to do that. If you're not just being yourself and just being relaxed. So I think that's the advice: just be relaxed and have a conversation. And even if you don't do that, if you're nervous, we understand that too. Um, so I don't know. I guess I didn't really answer your question. I think maybe I hinted at some of the things. If you ask questions where you clearly didn't put any effort into it, if it looks like you have no interest, I think an objective person would say this person has absolutely no interest in our program. I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah, and be sure to maintain a degree of professionalism. I think the biggest turnoff we've had is just people that come in and try to. I guess there's like some people that have come in trying to ex be like a lot very casual, trying to express that they're like, just one of us kind of thing. But like, yeah, that's fine if you're like if you have a laid back personality, or if you slip in a curse word or something here and then, like in your personal time. But like this isn't the time to do that when you're trying to put your best foot forward. I think, people mean well. They're like trying to be like super casual and conversational with us sometimes, but don't throw in curse words, don't, or, just slang terms, things like that. Just it might, it's not like, oh, we're not, ranking that person, but it just like kind of puts off like a little bit of like, well, if this is how they are, like in when they're supposed to be super professional. Like, how are they going to be when they're here with us in training? So
Some of the pitfalls that I can remember is, again, it's echoing a lot of this, but make it a conversation. Don't hand me a paper that you wrote. I can look that up on my own. Don't hand me a PowerPoint that you have done to show me your research. Like, let's have a conversation about it as opposed to doing that. So I would say that's one thing I've noticed that I has seen kind of over the last few years, which I was kind of shocked by. Other things that I think are, being brought up is the professionalism. It's okay to be casual, it's okay to joke around, but make sure you maintain that professionalism. And then if you're nervous, let us know. But please don't sound scripted, right? We can tell if you have a script that you are basically just reciting. So do mock interviews. Most of your guys' schools, I know, at USF, the medical school, we all do mock interviews for the medical students. So do those mock interviews. Listen, use AI and look at some practice questions and record yourself and see how you sound. So if you are nervous, it's okay to say it. And then try not to sound scripted and make it a conversation.
And I'll add one thing that I don't think I've encountered this, but don't bring up politics or religion or controversial things. The interview is not the place to do that. And I've heard of this happening, but fortunately, I don't think I've encountered it. It's okay to bring up sports teams, and maybe that's the most controversial thing you can bring up. If you're a Dolphins fan coming into Bills country, that's okay.
I mean, I'm in Florida. People bring up politics all the time. So I can tell you it's happened many times at our program. And I'm like, why are we talking about this right now, please?
Your patients will do that. But unfortunately, you shouldn't do that on an interview.
Agreed.
and the
I see there's
Astros
some more
cheating
questions.
scandal is still a sensitive topic for us here in Houston. So
So I see a couple questions. I'll at least start with the family planning and how to approach maternity leave. So just ask the question. I mean, we give all of the medical students when they come to interview, I actually just bring it up and keep it very open so people aren't uncomfortable asking. And so I can tell you my approach is I actually just put out there in the beginning of the interview and let everyone kind of know the maternity leave and how we approach that. But don't be shy to ask that question. It does not make you seem any different, right? This is part of life. I mean, I have two young kids and this was discussed many times. And so, especially of having a child outside of research time, yeah. So, listen, there's never a good time to have a baby. I'll be the first to tell you this, but you do it when it's right for you and your family. Okay. However, that's defined. So talk to your program director, talk to them and ask them on these interviews how they approach it. And I can tell you in the 7 years I've been either APD or PD, we've had many residents have children, and there's many ways to approach it. And you really try to find that solution with the resident of what makes sense, especially if it's outside of research time. But there's a lot of flexibility in how the ABR approaches it and also ACGME. And so, again, you want to see that the program's willing to work with you and find something that is acceptable. So that's kind of my initial approach is just ask the questions. We're used to it. We're happy to talk about it. And if we're not, you probably don't want to be there anyway. Um, and then I guess I'll let someone else, unless someone wants to add more to that, but kind of talking about signaling and geographic preferences. I think we may all come about it a little bit differently, but you'll see some similarities. I think that's a lot that people are asking.
yeah, we don't like I'd say part of the question was, is it worth applying to programs outside of the preference geographic region? I think and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think if you're not signaling a particular place, it doesn't tell you that they signaled another place, right? I think it just doesn't say that they signal. So I don't think we've interviewed plenty of people that have like not necessarily signaled our region. And then now there's like I think there's targeted signaling. You can send like specific pings to like I think up to 4 programs, which that's new to us. I don't know if that's we didn't participate in that last year, so that's like completely new to us. People have asked, that rotate with us have asked like, do we need to signal y'all since we rotated there and shown interest or like I think that's all I think everyone's like figuring that out as like live. I think it's a way to definitely show interest, but I don't think it's if you're applying outside of a specific interest, it's going to necessarily hurt you, and shouldn't discourage you from doing that.
Yeah, so we can see, at least on my end, what I remember from last year is we did have signals. So they can, I think, designate 4 signals. I tell the rotators that if they enjoyed their rotation, not to use the signal on our program, but to share that they did enjoy their time with us and that they are very interested. Otherwise, obviously, you're going to question it. So communication, be transparent, have those conversations. As far as the geographical preferences, what I remember last year is you could see that someone had no geographical preference. You could see that they designated one of their 2 geographical preferences in the area that your state is in, or you can see nothing, which means they did not designate your region as one of their 2 geographical preferences. But I will say, I did not. I looked at it as a tiebreaker. That was kind of been our approach. If I have 2 similar applications and someone signaled, okay, of course, I'm probably going to pick the person that signaled for an interview if I only have 1 spot left. But it's not going to make me give someone an interview that I wouldn't be interested in. And I think similarly for the geographical preferences, we kind of approach it similarly. So it's hard to know how to use which one and, think it through. But I would say that, for the most part, it was more of a tiebreaker if I had similar applications of, doing it. If someone had no geographical preference, then I didn't look at it as a plus or a minus. It was just a neutral approach.
And I don't really have to add much to add what's already been said. It's these signals are a new addition, and I think we're all learning how to interpret them and how to incorporate them. And ultimately, if you don't signal a place and you have a good application, you would still potentially get an offer from that place, very likely.
And I think the question about the signaling for the prelim or the intern year, yeah, I'm not sure about that, but if you are very interested in a program, reach out to the RADONC program, because a lot of like I know we tend to share kind of our ranking list with our internal medicine and surgery programs here, just to kind of give a little bit of idea of like who we're interested in and things. And so but if you're very specifically interested in this place, just make sure that you communicate with those programs in case they don't do something like that, to because they might be able to you know do something about that.
I know I reached out to my TY and prelim year that I ended up at. So it was a really good thing. It was geographically close to me. I just didn't get one because it was in North Carolina, even though it was an hour away, and I got the interview and then I went there. So I think that's another thing is just email the coordinator. I think we have a couple more questions, but I think one thing that we definitely need to touch on is like post interview communications. I think we're all kind of ingrained that like, oh, you should send a thank you of some sort, like growing up. It's not what we want in Braddock is the feeling I get. I know our program just says no communication, please, unless you have a question, and please ask that to the coordinator. I don't know if there's any differences with other programs.
There was a group of program directors, it's probably been 10 years ago, who wrote a paper specifically describing the need to not do that. And I actually grabbed a slide from Dr. Andler, who was a former program director at the University of Florida, and I show it to the residents. And basically says, we do not want to hear from you. You can send updates to your application to our coordinator, but don't send anything to the faculty. If we get a thank you note, we're going to throw it out and not look at it. And it sounds extreme, but the whole intent of that is to minimize the gamesmanship in the match. And that's, I think, the title of the paper was something along those lines, taking the gaming out of the match. So and especially if a program says don't send a thank you note, don't do that, because that may subliminally send a message that you weren't paying attention or don't care what the program director requested.
Thank
Yeah, I think
you. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
we also don't. We just tell people not to send them.
definitely makes less stress on the applicant, I would say
Yeah.
as well, because then you don't have to go back, oh, who did you send that to or whatnot. I know we're getting out of time, but I think if you guys have just one more minute to address some of our questions about regarding like IMGs, whether they completed a radiation oncology residency before or not, I feel like we're pretty a field that's open to IMGs and DOs. I'm a DO.
Yeah, I think we definitely interview a good number of IMGs. I guess is the question just kind of just general advice for people that have already done a residency. So
Yeah.
I guess one thing, just have a really good, again, I kind of go back to that story, but have like a really good like um plan as to why, you want to basically repeat a residency, have a good kind of what you want to get out of a specific training here, what things you might have, what things you learned in your training that might kind of help you, bolster you to be a stronger applicant or trainee here. Maybe some strengths that you may have gained from your training that you can apply to the program and offer the program. There's a lot of kind of people we've interviewed that have, extensive backgrounds and techniques that we don't, use here. And, how can that kind of be applicable? Just kind of have a really good kind of story and background as far as, what you can bring.
Yeah, so I'll add, I think you brought up the MD versus DO. To us, at least at our program, we don't differentiate. To be fully transparent, actually, no, we have DOs. I can't tell you which one of our residents are DOs versus MDs. Just to kind of give you that insight of it really doesn't matter to me. As far as the IMG question, we definitely have interviewed a lot of IMGs. We have some that have graduated and have stayed on as faculty. So what I will say is a lot of times RadOnc is a very small field. There's a lot of networking involved. And so if you have a mentor that has some connection to a program and has like a unique research experience that your interests are, have your mentor reach out to that person at that program. You would be surprised at how important that is. Um, to me, that would be my biggest advice is rely on your mentors to make those connections for you. Send emails, but again, showcase just like what's been said, what makes you unique and why the program that you're emailing is a place that is right for you. And again, that's not to IMGs, that's actually to everybody on this call, right? So I don't want to say that specific, but I think there's a lot of questions of, what advice specifically to IMGs, especially training, training outside and, things like that is rely on your network, highlight what you can bring to that department, which is what everyone should be doing anyway, and making those connections.
And I agree with everything that's said. I think IMGs just have a little bit more of a hurdle because, um, it's just they have to make themselves stand out a little bit more in any way that you can do that. Networking and emailing, signaling, having a strong application, doing rotations in programs. Those are all ways that you can improve your application. And it's again, it's tough to there's the people that are reviewing applications are reviewing a lot of them to try to make yourself stand out. But if you do those things, I think you would stand out as somebody. And I think expressing genuine interest also carries a lot of weight. I agree with that.
Okay, I promise this is the last one if we do have a minute. Rank order strategy. I don't think it needs to be super complicated. I know the advice was given to me. If you don't want to be there, don't rank it.
Yes. If you do not want to match there, do not rank it. I agree. Um, you know, My understanding of the match is that it actually benefits you. So rank where you want to be. Okay. Rank your order list however you say, I don't know, write pros and cons. Some of the advice that I give the medical students that work with us is that when you leave an interview, whether it's Zoom or in person, record yourself about your impressions of it because a lot of them will blend together and a lot of people can say or get an idea of how they felt about a program by listening to their voice and how they talked about it as opposed to writing things down. So make a little voice recording, look at it, and then truly do it of where do you want to be? And again, I think it was brought up earlier, a lot of people stay in the geographical region of where you train. So that may have some, implications as you think through. And If not, if you really want an academic job versus private practice, look at where the graduates go afterwards. And again, this is to benefit you, so rank it where you want to be. Be selfish in that moment and really think about yourself there and your family.
Yeah, and don't rank based on where you think you that it kind of yeah, just like you said, just kind of on the flip side, don't rank based on where you think you're going to get in because yeah, like you said, Dr. Frakes, it kind of the algorithm I think favors goes by you guys first. So like if you put somewhere that you're most likely to get in, you're going to match there, and you're not even going to have a chance to see kind of if you would have gone into other more maybe more stretch programs and research how the algorithm actually works because it is kind of complicated, but there's some like YouTube videos and things just so that can kind of put your mind at ease that the way you list things just because you put your safety programs a little lower doesn't mean you're gonna skip over or if you yeah, if you put it pretty lower, you're not going to like lose that spot. It's just you have a better chance of getting maybe your more favorable spots.
It's very much a personal de decision, and it's hard to give advice for something that's so personal. And you've done this before in your life when choosing undergrad and medical school. Obviously, you didn't rank them, but you chose one and you weighed the pros and cons. The one practical thing I will say is some programs have two different slots. One that might be starting as a PGY 2 months after the match, and one that's 15 months after the match. Make sure you don't rank the wrong one. And basically makes it would make it so that you wouldn't match at that program at all. And that doesn't happen frequently, but some programs do have different tracks. I think some have built-in 5-year programs where the internship is built in, and you can choose between that and the one where you start as a PGY2. So make sure you're just ranking the right one. Um, but again, it's not common, but you don't want to make that kind of mistake.
I always forget that the match algorithm won a Nobel Science Prize or something like that. I don't exactly know when, but it is a fun fact. So like hate it and love it. It's a great system. And it's painful for reasons, obviously, because you only have so much control. I think we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for staying past an hour. I know that's been immensely helpful. Hopefully, we can get this up on either ACRO's website or YouTube. I think ACRO does have a YouTube. So I really, really appreciate it. If you need to reach me, if you have any questions that didn't get answered, please feel free to email me. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. Um, yeah. Good luck, everyone, on their interview process and match process. Don't forget to have fun. Like, you only get to do this once, hopefully. And it really is fun to meet everyone I know I had such good relationships with everyone. It was fun.
These will
Yeah,
be
and
your
you'll see.
colleagues, so enjoy it, please. It's so much fun. I still talk to some people I interviewed with, so enjoy those moments and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, you'll see these people at Astro and conferences and stuff. So I still, yeah, same here.
And I still remember meeting some legends in the field when I interviewed. So it's a great opportunity to um, just meet the leaders in the field and meet your future peers as well. So enjoy it.